evening. The year was 1999, and a new book, Our Kind of People, debuted on the New York Times bestseller list, shedding light on what the author called the Black elite and their way of life. The book devoted several pages to the Links Incorporated and other established organizations and locations, sharing images and stereotypes known to some and new to many. Thank you for joining this crucial conversation with acclaimed historian, Dr. Howard Dodson, Dr. Patricia Russell McLeod, who was the Link's national president at the time the book was researched and written, and renowned philosopher and author, Dr. Cornel West, who went against the grain of his lineage to empower and educate a nation. Our moderator this evening is broadcast journalist, Mrs. Alexandra Finney. We hope this discussion will leave you empowered for change as we share the historical context of the Black experience, motivation for change, and the power of influence of our kind of people. Thank you. Good evening, and welcome to Moving Beyond Our Kind of People to enrich the communities we serve. Tonight, we are joined by a very distinguished panel with insight to keep us pressing forward. Dr. Howard Dodson is an American scholar, lecturer, and author whose resume has included the director of the Moreline Spingarn Research Center and Howard University Libraries. In addition, he was the director of New York's acclaimed Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture for over 25 years, increasing their artifacts to over 10 million. A former Peace Corps volunteer, he knows what service looks like from the heart. Dr. Dodson brings a wealth of historical context of the Black experience to our panel tonight. Dr. Patricia Russell McLeod, beloved 11th National President of the Links Incorporated, hails from Indianapolis, Indiana. From humble beginnings of a hard-working family, Dr. Russell McLeod rose through the ranks using her God-given talents and love of humanity to lead the most prestigious Black women's organization in the country, while gaining national recognition as a best-selling author and premier public and motivational speaker. Under her leadership, the Links Incorporated made their international presence known, building schools in Africa, throughout the diaspora. As her administration is the time period Our Kind of People was being researched, the conversation is pivotal. Dr. Cornel West is a renowned American philosopher, political activist, social critic, actor, and public intellectual. The son of a school principal and Department of Defense executive, Dr. West focuses on the role of race, gender, and class in American society, and the means by which people respond to their self-reflections. The Ivy League scholar has set the tone of many a world stage, whether it be through his best-selling books, in the classroom, public forums, or civil rights demonstrations that have even led to his arrest. Dr. Cornel West says what he means and means what he says, with a passion and vigor. Welcome, guests and panelists, to our presentation this evening. We welcome our moderator, Mrs. Alexandra Finney.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Moving Beyond Our Kind of People to enrich the communities we serve, presented by the art facet of the southern area of the Links Incorporated. I'm so excited. I'm so honored to be here this evening with all of you. My name is Alex Finney, and it is indeed an honor to moderate with our esteemed panel tonight. This evening's presentation is the second, I want to let everybody know, it's the second in the series focusing on racism, colorism, and classism, and how that is portrayed in the arts and beyond. We know that this is a very important conversation, so buckle in, enjoy. We are all going to walk away having learned a lot. Its evolution is a result of the new hit television series based on the book by Lawrence Otis Graham. Our discussion tonight will center around three parts. I want to go over those with you first. The first part is Our Kind of People. How did we get here? The second part will be preserving the legacy while living the dream. And the third part is One Accord, moving forward as change agents. You have met our guests via the wonderful intro video that you just saw there. So we're going to jump right into it and get started. Segment one, Our Kind of People. How did we get here? Dr. Dotson, it's so good to see you.
Pleasure.
So this question I have is for you. When we think about racism, colorism, and classism in the Black community, how are these three terms connected, and why is it still prevalent 400 years post our arrival in the Americas?
Well, we should start by, I should simply acknowledge before we start that I'm both an Alpha, Phi Alpha. I'm a member of the Boule, and I'm a member of the Masons. And so I'm a part of the groups that were the subject of that of the book that we're talking about, and have been a part of those organizations for, well, my earliest was Alpha Phi Alpha, goes back to 1959. So it's a long part of my life and part of my life existence. I think to get to your question, all societies, all groups, to the best of my knowledge, are still stratified entities, stratified by race, by class, by gender, by other groupings, by religion. And that process of stratification that takes place in societies, and have been taking place in societies throughout the history of societies, it should not be a surprise that we have such stratification now. The thing that is of concern to us today is how those stratification relationships within the African American community have evolved over time. Where have they brought us to this point in time? And to what extent are they, are the stratifications an impediment to our struggle for freedom and justice and human dignity, as opposed to instruments of advancement and development for all of our stratified groups? What is for me very important in today's conversation is a recognition of the fact that our group and its stratification is part of a larger systemic stratification, which carries with it these both systematic and structural forms of power that are inequitably distributed, and that we have relatively little, and have had relatively little, access to. And so our concern here today is really about how do we take that which is a normal part of human organization and human relationships, maximize the potential of the stratified elements, and try to figure out in this point in time, in this time that we're living in right now, what is the best way to both organize our activity and deploy our activities to both center our struggle for freedom and human dignity in everything that we do, and find ways of mobilizing those resources that we have at our disposal to advance the agendas that we create and we believe have possibilities for taking us to the next stages of our both group and individual and collective development.
And Dr. Dotson, I do just want to follow up really quickly here in terms of what you're saying. And what comes to mind is just the stereotypes, right? That we are all forced into on a daily basis all the time. How do we go about starting to break those stereotypes? I know that this is a conversation, it's something that we talk about a lot, but from your perspective, how do we go about breaking some of those stereotypes?
Well, some of it is being done by the systemic processes that we're involved in. Mm-hmm. At an earlier period of time, the colorism was probably the most dominant divider in the African American community. Colorism has kind of faded into the background, and we're actually in an age of more class and really sharp distinctions within our group all along the lines of class. And our challenge is to find ways of communicating with one another around the day-to-day issues that are affecting each of us, some of us more proportionately than others, but those things that are in some way or another constraining, limiting, preventing us from pursuing our objectives, our struggle objectives. And for me, one of the things that I think I'd say just to all of the fraternities and sororities and other groups that we are part of, whatever else we do with those groups should have an annual struggle agenda.
Mm-hmm.
That struggle agenda may be one thing or two things or five things, but it should be a conscious part of the agenda of the organizations that's formulated as collective embrace of those priorities. And then the resources of the organization and those that they can get their hands on need to be mobilized to pursue those agendas relentlessly, with the expectation that it'll move our collective agenda that much further forward. In the absence of that, we end up basically kind of responding to every crisis that shows up. And we do need to be able to respond to crises, but we should be shaping the agenda, not simply responding to someone else's. And so I think that if in each of our chapters, in each of our organizations, we can come to some shared commitment on the part of the members participating. And then some of these things are big enough to be taken on by all of the fraternities and sororities together. I mean, the most immediate one is the current attack on voting rights. Mm. That's not something that's directed at the, I say, the light skin or the dark skin Negroes. It's all the Negroes. And the objective is to disempower Black folk at a time when we've, at a level of consciousness and organization, have become a significant influence in American national politics. And so we need to, first of all, be constantly taking stock of where we are. What is our power position right now? Where do we want to be as a empowered people a year from now, 5 years from now? And what is the agenda we have in place to try to pursue that? And that needs to go, as I said, among our respective fraternities, sororities, and other groups. But it needs to go on among the Pan-Hellenic group as well, to have this kind of capacity to mobilize all the resources we have to attack the biggest problems that we face.
Seems as though you're really hitting on that that proactive versus reactive approach, and then springboarding into action. Yeah.
We have no agenda if we have no agenda.
Right.
So that's why it's so important as far as I'm concerned. And whatever else, for whatever other reason that our various groups were formed, there was always some struggle dimension to it. We just need to elevate it now as we face larger and larger challenges and larger problems, many of which are problems of the society that we have to help solve in order to protect ourselves.
Right.
So
Dr. Dotson, hold that thought. I now want to go over to Dr. West. Hi.
How are you doing?
It's fantastic being here with you too tonight.
It's a blessing for me and to be here with the great Howard Dotson, who means the world to so many of us as teacher, as exemplar of what it means to be a freedom fighter inside and outside, within the system or on the streets. Brother Howard, always moving back and forth. So it's a blessing to be here with the beloved Links, very much so.
Great to be here with you tonight.
And Patricia, well, I want to deal with, of course, the president herself, Patricia Russell McCloud. I mean, herself.
Dr. West, Dr. Dotson really kicked us off there, a really powerful message. But I have this question for you as well as we dig a little bit deeper. Your background, in contrast to mainstream stereotypical Black America at the time, it could be considered one of privilege. Is there a catalyst in your formative years that provoked you to be an advocate of civil rights at an early age?
Well, appreciate the question. Now, I certainly had the highest conceivable privilege by being the second son of the inimitable Irene B. West, who herself was a Lincoln, as well as the AKA, and being the son of Clifton West, who was an Alpha. I'm an Alpha just like my brother, Howard is. Because for me, privilege has to do with the moral and spiritual resources that they gave us. They gave us a supernatural love tied to Shiloh Baptist Church, Reverend Willie P. Cook and Deacon Hinton and Sarah Ray, that told us that the kingdom of God is within us, and everywhere we go, we ought to leave a little heaven behind. You see, that's not just words. That's a way of life, looking at the world through moral and spiritual lens, looking at the world through the lens of the cross, which signify unarmed truth and unapologetic love, beginning with black love. Black love's a crime in the white supremacist world. So when you really love black people, you can see through the color, you can see through the class, that they and we are one in terms of our humanity, our need for each other. And the greatness of black people has always been the love warriors, the freedom fighters, the joy spreaders, and the wounded healers, be they artists, politicians, plumbers, pharmacists, lawyers, whatever. And so mom and dad just taught us that what privilege really means is never succumbing to the idols of just colorism and classism, never succumbing to arrogance and condescension. It's about integrity, honesty, decency, learning how to empty yourself to be of service to the least of these, so that you gain a joy in struggle rather than just the pleasure of social status. And that moral and spiritual greatness has been at the center of the best of black people.
And Dr. West, you brought up there in the beginning your parents. What was their reaction to your activism?
Well, they were worried because, like Brother Dodson and the others, it means you live under death threat every day, and you need protection and security. And they love little Cornell, you know what I mean. And so they were continually worried in that regard. But they taught me to be free. When they sang "Lift Every Voice," they meant it. That anthem of our people. Lift your voice, Cornell. Just remember that we hope you remain a Jesus-loving, free black man. And when you lift your voice, you attempt to do it in a humble way, but with tenacity, with a seriousness, and most importantly, a willingness to bear witness and live and die for what you're talking about. So they just taught me that kind of integrity. And I was blessed. I didn't ask to be son of such unbelievable, magnificently grandparents. I just showed up.
Yeah. And what did they say? You can have a lot in life, but integrity, that's one of the most important qualities.
That's true. So, and I'm sure your parents told you the same thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is the great tradition we're talking about.
Dr. West, I want you to hold that thought as well, because now I want to move on over to Dr. Russell McLeod.
Greetings.
Good evening. How are you?
Great. Thank you.
It's so good to be here with you tonight. So the question I have for you is this. So you graciously, of course, share your humble beginnings, which evolved into your personal growth development, manifesting into a world-class public speaker and leading what has been said is the most prestigious Black women's organization in America. In contrast to the book, you have defied the odds, achieving what wasn't supposed to be possible. And as an advocate of self-awareness and reflection, what is the je ne sais quoi, if you will, necessary to transcend those boundaries and be considered a voice worth listening to and a voice for change?
Thank you. I am pleased to be a part of this erudite compilation of thought leaders to focus on it's not where you start, it's where you finish. And when you want to ascertain whether and to what extent a person can have an humble beginning and still thrive, in my view, when you look at the features that you have, You start with what you have to work with, what you can to get where you're going, be it talent, skills, ability, expertise, whether it's innate or acquired, whether it's established or it's emerging from your experience and exposure, your education, your common sense, your chutzpah or guts or mother wit, against the odds, that you come up with a compass for your life that becomes your true north. You can make a decision to stand in place or to take a first step, and then the next. And in life, you can be a spectator or a participator. You can be a change agent, or you can be an advocate, an activist, a strategist, a thought leader, or you can be the one who hears their name like the gospel song. Hush, somebody is calling your name. In other words, you can be a navigator, not a passenger, which has nothing, in my view, to do with an humble beginning. It's a mind made up. It's a decision that you make to prioritize. Dr. Dotson calls it a struggle agenda, that you are going to be engaged anyhow. So those have been my drivers. Those have been my missions and mandates and mantras, to be a participator, a navigator, to exceed and excel, to hear the call that somebody is calling my name. The je ne sais quoi means in French, I know not what. I know that there is something, a it factor, a anyhow spirit, a something within to turn a stumbling block into a stepping stone, largely because my parents worked 2 jobs. My parents valued education to be aligned and with the thought that you want to engage with people and activities that are worthy of emulation. So set a goal and have a timetable to achieve against what others thought to be impossible. So those who don't get it done, they need to step aside for those who are doing it. Life is not a forever opportunity. So you have to know that you can't always think you can get ready to get ready. You have to, at some point, be ready. So if not me, then who?
Right.
And if not now, then when?
And what you were saying, you know, making sure you're ready. What's the saying? I think the saying always goes, if you stay ready, then you don't have to get ready. So there we have it.
And if it's ingrained in you, then that's what you know.
Right.
You're not in a practice mode of getting ready. You come from a survival of a make do, of exceeding against the odds. So you come on with it. You're ready. You're
ready.
So I pledged alone in college by myself. So you get a new awareness of what you can take and what you will go through. And so you claw to the top because it's a better view.
Oh, I like that one. I'm gonna have to keep that one in my back pocket. Dr. Russell McLeod, thank you so much. I'm gonna go back now to Dr. Dotson. I do want to follow up with you. We have a lot of questions. Everybody's buckled in because we're getting some great responses here. Since the early 1900s, we have created our own organizations that have aided the classism and colorism as well as racism here. And how can these organizations really, when we look at these 3 big pictures right here, how can these organizations be true to serving these communities of our culture without truly being integrated into them? Or does that even really matter?
Well, I'm not sure I would call it integration, but at least a sense of shared values and interests that certainly those who are in the middle and upper class you almost have to work at it every day to keep the needs of the African American community centered in your life, because there is this incredibly powerful communications media and other seductions that are constantly, I say, inviting you to leave that space and leave that ground and go someplace else, frequently for yourself and yourself only. And my message to everyone who has the mistaken notion that you got there by yourself, you've already been paid for 3 or 4 times over. Yet your space where you are has been bought already through somebody's struggle, and you as a person of talent and of resources and hopefully commitment need to be able to keep in mind the fact that you have prior obligations that actually are ahead of whatever your greatest romantic aspirations are. I'm not one, and no one else should be able to tell you what you should do or when you should do it. That's a decision you have to make for yourself. But every one of us has an obligation to pay forward that which was paid forward for us. And again, I don't purport to have any special genius about telling you what you should do. You know who you are. You know what talents and abilities you have. And to the extent that you're attuned to what's going on with Black people across the board, you can decide how to use your resources to address 1 or 2 or 3 of the challenges that we face. But do something, because someone did something to make it better for you. That would be my first response to that. There's some other elements to it, but the key thing for me is that that generation of let us call it the middle and upper class of the privileged among us need to know that privilege has been bought through struggle. And however much privilege you have, some portion of it should be allocated to continuing that struggle and helping those that haven't gotten as far as you have thus far.
Yeah. Dr. West. Hi.
How you doing? How you doing there?
So we kind of touched on there, Dr. Dotson, a bit in terms of just the role of media. I'm in media and really just understanding the different hats we wear and the importance of media. So the question I have for you is, what role has the media and the arts played as we confront the realities of racism, colorism, and classism and its effect on Black America?
Well, see, I would argue that Black music is the greatest modern tradition of spiritual fortitude, artistic creativity, and moral courage in the whole world. So that when you think about arts, I think especially of the fundamental role of the Black musicians in bequeathing to us levels of confidence and dignity and delicacy and inventiveness and courage. And they authorize another world. You can't listen to Billie Holiday singing Good Morning Heartache. You can't listen to Luther Vandross singing any song without recognizing they take you somewhere else. It's true for Mahalia Jackson. It's true for Aretha. And We need the vitality and the vibrancy and the energy to authorize another world so that we can be empowered in this one. I come from the Black church, so we already had the kingdom of God. We already had what it means to be in contact with a greater power linked to this world, but not fully exhausted by this world, be in the world, but not of it. Well, the arts do that in a secular level too. Now, when you get to the media, you know, you're talking about those who run the media who tend to be highly threatened by deep Black truth telling, deep Black love. It's hard to even get, you know, some shows on to talk about Black love, let alone Black love among the working class and precious Black poor as well as the middle class. But we're making some breakthroughs because we've got some courageous truth tellers trying to make their way into the corporate structure of mass media. But whatever the context is, my dear sister, without the courage, without the willingness to take a risk, without the willingness to pay a cost, you're going to end up conformist, complacent, and too cowardly. You know, James Baldwin's got that wonderful letter to his nephew. One of the most important sentences in that letter was, you, comma, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Brother Martin said he'd rather be dead than afraid. Mary Ellen Pleasant in California, first godmother of human rights in California, gave all that money to John Brown. She used to start every speech. I'd rather be a corpse than a coward. Can't be a jazz musician if you're a coward. Can't be a follower of Jesus if you're a coward, actually. But I mean, that's a different direction of the conversation.
You know, I could touch on, you know, I could talk about the role of media in terms of Black community for a long time, because there's so many thoughts on that. But when you were talking about music, right, and media, and how we're starting to see a little bit more in terms of showing Black love, we can do better, but we're coming up. How do you think it's evolved though over the last 50 years, would you say?
Well, I would say that it's been very, very sad in the last 20 or 25 years with the shift to hip hop, because you see, Black music and Black culture has always been a culture that connected tenderness to toughness. It connected gentleness to a certain kind of courage and a delicacy. What we've had the last 25 years is a dumbing down. It's this form of spiritual warfare against young Black people, so that they don't have a tenderness in their music. They don't have a gentleness in their music. They got some, but not as much as they need, especially not my generation. That's why you don't have any Delphonics or the Dramatics or Enchantment or Emotions or the Jones Girls or the Blue Magic or Stylistics anymore, because you don't get soft, silky voices that are singing about tenderness that can empower other people to be both tender and tough. You get posing and posturing, usually forms of toxic masculinity, usually forms of women being portrayed in debased ways and so forth. And those are decisions made by the oligarchs in the recording industry. It's not just responsibility of Black folk. Black folk must take some responsibility, but the people who make big money on it are not disproportionately Black. See, so they don't want the softness of a Sam Cooke. They don't want any more Aretha's. They don't want Smokey Robertsons and Donny Hathaways, because Curtis Mayfield's, because it's too empowering. So the ones who build on Curtis Mayfield, let's say, they're on the margins. They're on the margins. You probably too young to remember Rudy Ray Moore talking about Dolomite. Now, Rudy Ray Moore was a brother who was highly talented in his own way, but he was not at the center of the culture. You see, Aretha and Curtis Mayfield at the center of the culture. Now young people have a Black culture vis-a-vis corporate media, where Rudy Ray Moore is at the center of it. And he was always telling these jokes and dirty jokes. I ain't got nothing against dirty jokes. I'm a Christian, but not a Puritan. But I also know that we got Black genius and Black talent that goes beyond a lot of these debased images that's being produced for our young people, you see. And so we've got to say, look, the greatness of our people is one in which we've always had unbelievable talent tied to vision, tenderness, sweetness, kindness, toughness, courage, vision. We're losing out on that.
We're losing out on that. I know I do have to move on, but it does beg the question when you say we're losing out on that, how can we reshift and, shift that focus and try to get it back?
Yes.
So,
yes.
that's the next part of this, but I do have to move on. I want to move on to Dr. Russell McLeod. So hold that thought, Dr. West, okay? Dr. Russell McLeod, I do want to get back to you and talk about, we know over your decades as a member of the Links Incorporated, from grassroots to leadership, how have you seen the demographics of its membership change? I think that's a really important question there. But also, what do you feel is the catalyst behind that change, and how can the organization best use that diversity to its advantage?
I think the heterogeneity relates to change itself is the constant. It's the common denominator. So yes, your membership does morph into a different demographic, a different sociological stratification, but the membership in LinkedIn requires, underline big font, that you know the organization. You have to know what you are joining. It becomes critical to identify the organization's unwavering, irrefutable purpose, vision, mission, mandate, and message for itself. You don't want to join because you have amnesia about what it is that it actually is or is not. It's the identification of women who are like-minded and aligned on two underpinning principles: friendship and service. Okay, the organization is a sisterhood. Women are linked, latched, locked one to the other. They have the mindset of better together. The plight, the progress, the prowess that can collectivize their skills to serve the communities where they live, work, and play. So those metrics then are our starting place. If you don't think that you can be a friend, to have a friend, if you don't think that you can give service to meet people at their point of need without judgment, if you don't think you can go the extra mile, arrive early and stay late, or be so satisfied with knowing and understanding and accepting that it is not a you show, that it is not lights, camera, action for you, that giving is its own reward, then guess what? It may not be your best fit for a membership organization, because if you really want to help yourself, you have to help somebody else. The membership clarity then of LinkedIn requires that you know what Links represents. It is not an apex pinnacle quantum leap into high society. It is not Divalicious and a designer only apparel organization for the membership. It is not a resume builder or at a glance acceptance into a tea and crumpet way of methodology and position and placement because I am a link. It is not a collective mindset of us against them, or a compilation of those who are real or imagined in their mind of being better than. It is like-mindedness to work together to serve humankind, persons who might otherwise be denied. Therefore, the diversity is a strength. It's a strength because we are heterogeneic. We have the professions of homemakers and educators, professors and judges, attorneys, politicians and public relations, media experts, scientists and researchers, inventors and publishers. We have administrators and entrepreneurs and businesswomen. So we become a force. We become a stellar signature, a footprint in the communities that we serve. And so we are together in partnerships with organizations that want to be a part of the greater good. So our numbers are too significant to ignore. Our diversity is a competitive advantage in programmatic engagement and civil rights, equity, and inclusion mindset and action.
Perfect. And I think, you know, what you were touching on there, right? It's an old saying, and it's truly one that speaks to my heart always so much. And that is, do for others without expecting anything in return. And that's like such an important quality that so many of us should live by as we step out of our doors every day. You know, do for others. The goodness will come back to you if you're good to other people, but
And it will
don't do just to
shoulder.
expect that.
It will sit on your shoulder when you least expect it. If you don't start out needing to be recognized and needing to be lights, camera, action for yourself, if you've got to move only when the camera is on you, that's not giving. Giving is its own reward. And it is so satisfying when a young person says to you, the links made the difference. They closed the gap. They made me know what I didn't know. I'm better for the encounter. That's the thank you. That's the recognition. And that's the benchmark that we set as an organization. So know that you know what it is and what it is not. And any person who is or would be is better for the knowledge.
Powerful words there, Dr. Russell McLeod. Thank you. We are going to get ready to transition into segment 2. So as we get ready to do that here, you know, if we were to really just look at, and I have just a few words to read here, really look at the images portrayed in the media during the formative years of the 1900s, we would think that people of color were limited to sharecroppers. We have domestics and uncivilized natives. Obviously, the evolution of Africans in America has come a long way, and we know it came a long way certainly by the 1950s. Organizations have been created to strengthen the bonds of African American communities and culture, and our place in mainstream media begun to incorporate, and also in that corporate sector there, we're talking about politics and beyond, while still living in a segregated and very much divided society. Our next segment that we are going to delve into right now focuses on those formative years and the ensuing development mindset, of course, and all that followed as a result of that as we continue pushing forward, looking back so that we can have a clearer picture as we begin moving on. Okay, we still have so much more conversation to go, so I'm excited to start segment 2, preserving the legacy while living the dream. Dr. Russell McLeod, I'm calling you back. I hope you were able to get a sip of water like I did as well to make sure that the throat is still working, because we got a lot of talking to still do. Okay, so at the time that Lawrence Otis Graham did his research and wrote Our Kind of People, you were actually president of the Links Incorporated. So we know that the book, it really brought an entirely new influx of interest in the organization. No doubt about that. Why do you feel that the book did not focus on the grassroots and global contributions and the improvement of the organization? And did it help or did it hinder our public image?
Think about it. It was 1999 when the book was written, and Nelson Mandela was stepping down as the first Black president in South Africa. America was still, as it is today, in its pull and tug for fairness, equality, justice, and otherness. Still was the cloud for the Black and brown. So the book, in my view, was dedicated to the goal of being the best at the time and the only book of the inside glance at the upper class of Black life. It was to be or become the big reveal of attitudes and behaviors of the upper class and their purported preferences and prejudices. It was the inside look at how they live and how they act, and those of color, but not of kind. It was classification, yet again, of us against them. That's what the book was supposed to do. It was to shine on an undiscovered reality, the hidden truth, the serum that was going to drip, drip on the organizations, associations, and groups that classified themselves as other at the top. So highlighting that stratification, the classism, colorism, and even the otherness of who and how African Americans are once they have a seat at the top. The book was not, in my view, written to either chronologue good news of civic engagement, programmatic difference, organizational commitment, or service to humankind. It was not a book about hours of volunteerism. And by the way, volunteerism is not a spectator sport. It was not by design set out to say, pat on the back, you did a mighty good job. It wasn't to talk about health fairs or walks for a cause or make a health a habit. It wasn't to show that Links, for example, were involved in building houses in partnership with Habitat Humanity, or their debutante balls or cotillions and botillions. They were so that we could have a link and a mink. It was to provide scholarship money for students who would otherwise not have the choice and the paid in full tuition. The book was written in 1999. So the frame, the value of the links under the international trends and services facet wasn't interested in identifying during Africa or programs across the miles or national trends that showed countless hours of tutorials and ranging from nutrition. If you knew better, you do better. What you eat and how you eat will eat you alive if you don't pay attention to intake, or all the way up to academic excellence, that a C will not see you through. That was not the purpose. Instead, it was to select organizations that have memberships of power, prominence, presence, position, assets, and resources, and connective tissue to difference-making status and stature, to give the skinny the 411 on how and who we in those membership organizations allegedly, air quotes, really are. I'm a telecommunications lawyer, and you don't have to be in law to know and understand that if it bleeds, Madam Media expert, it leads. So all of the composition of job well done and civic engagement, it's a story, but it's not the story. So if you want a book to sell, it has to have a life of its own. It has to have curiosity, not conflict. It has to create conversation. It has to have a buzz. And what results? If you have that buzz, it becomes a must read, ascending to the top. Did it hurt links? Let me just say this to you. The line is long for link membership. Our observance of 75 years is beginning on Thursday. 75 years, founding, longevity, clarity of our mission, irreplaceable friendship, and qualitatively measurable record of service for betterment of humankind. So we have 16,000 members. It's by invitation, and the line is long. Members, chapters, over 200, right at 290, Caribbean, the United States, London, England, contributions to just causes exceeding well over 22 million hours and dollars. Truth is truth. It's incontrovertible. Crushed to the ground, truth will rise again. So there is truth. There are acts of omission and commission in the writing. And while those who don't know should not say, I am mindful of the fact that the 15th International President of the Links Incorporated, Margot James Copeland, spoke to the National Assembly. And she continually urged her truth under the phrase that I now share with you. Check the record. The membership of the Links Incorporated are like-minded women who are interested and interest groups for community service without interruption. And guess what? And without apology for who and how we are. We do a good day's work, and it's no shade that we are achieved, accomplished, astute, positioned, pertinent, connected, daunting, unapologetic. Check the record.
Well, it sounds like, we looked at, the book and paging through as you were just doing there. It doesn't seem as though that you guys have lost a step at all.
No, not a step.
Yeah.
We didn't stumble.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to go back over to Dr. Dotson here. I want to bring you back in because I know as a former head of a major Black institution, you've personally, of course, sought out funding and support from Main Street Corporate America. But how do we seek their support while maintaining our dignity? I think that this is a really, really important question, right? Why are our Black causes still relying on white America to survive? And I'm going to pause there. If you can ask that first, I have a follow-up question as well.
Well, I'll just use my example of my work at the Schomburg as probably as good a reflection as any. I saw the Schomburg Center as a national institution serving people of all races and groups across the country, with an emphasis on the African diaspora community. Because it was a national organization, I believe that the city should support it, the state should support it, the federal government should support it, and corporations that have intersecting interests should support it. Mm-hmm. I never took the position that, and I should say this, I will say it, the Schomburg Center was part of the New York Public Library. And the New York Public Library had 5 units like the Schomburg Center and 89 other branch libraries. And that was just in 3 boroughs in New York City. It had one of the best fundraising infrastructures in the country. When I went there, they were starting a major $250,000 capital campaign. And the Schomburg Center was in it for a grand total of $1 million to be raised at the end of the campaign. I met with the development director and said that that was a waste of time and energy. We could raise more money. And we eventually ended up negotiating the amount of money to be raised, and then actually going beyond that in the first major capital campaign that the Schomburg Center had ever had. A lot of the money was coming from corporate and quotes white institutions, but the white institutions actually are American institutions, and we are part of the American population. And if we don't claim what is a reasonable share out of that, then we're doing ourselves a disservice. We should make a claim for money as a cultural institution, just as an example. Every place that the Metropolitan Museum and the other major institutions go out and lay a claim for money, make a demand for that. That is in no way, and should never, in no way be seen as something that we neglect in terms of our attempts to raise money within the African American community. And I'll say this because it's a 2-part story. I'll do the short version. The first campaign that we raised, we received no 5-figure gifts from African Americans. The second campaign that I did was directed at African Americans, singularly so, even though we had planned for that to be the case in the first one. And the honest to God's truth, when we did that, banks were not lending money in any significant amount for any kind of venture capital projects among Black folk. And so any new venture that a Black Ebony or Jet or a Percy Sutton or the radio station, they either had to self-finance that or they didn't do it. And so I went around having read Ebony and all of the millionaires. I went around to all the millionaires looking for my piece of the action. And by the time I finished talking to them, I was reaching in my pocket for my checkbook to write them. It was so leveraged, it was unbelievable. The good news is between that one and the subsequent one, many of those barriers to access to capital were coming down, and we were able to get significant gifts, 6-figure gifts actually, from a number of African Americans across the country. And we were able to work with African Americans that were in those corporations who were going to have to give some money to somebody Black anyway to get us a significant amount of money out of that. And we were able to get the federal money and the state money and the city money. So any money that's out there that's in the philanthropy world should be perceived as part of, as the money that's accessible to Black folk. That's number one. Money that's available for supporting the American people. Black people should lay a claim to a minimum of the percentage that we are in the society. And because they haven't been doing it in the past, been asked for more. But I did not come to the job on the assumption that, and quite frankly, the library would have been more pleased if I was not pursuing the money. because I mean, we ended up actually in competitive relationships for money from single donors, and unless I had already cut a deal, I would be cut out. And so you go aggressively, you go into those situations aggressively, looking to raise as much money as you possibly can within the African American community, and doing the same thing within the general society. You don't let anybody off the hook.
I think, I mean, that was fantastic there. I was, just thinking, and the follow-up I wanted to do, and I know that we're a little tight on time, but when we're talking about just the wealth of Black America, I feel as though that the focus on that now is really greater than ever, in just terms of where we are in terms of a society as a whole. But of course, when we look at that, making sure that we as a whole, as a society, as a people, are doing enough to be able to propel that forward, but in a positive way. That was a question that I had as well, in terms of just how we represent each other, how we represent each other in terms of wealth, and then being able to propel that into the next generation.
Well, we're in an, I don't think, I'm 99% sure that we have never been in a better material space than we are today.
Okay.
More Black people have more money.
So you backed me up on that. So, okay. No, so I was on target then.
Yeah. More people have more Black people have more money and disposable income. But again, it's a relatively small percentage of the total Black population. Right. Okay. And again, in all honesty, all of that money put together probably could not solve the problems of the African American community if that's all we tried to do. The level of inequality that's there, not of our own making, but of the making of the society, says that that's a responsibility that the society has a significant duty to address. And so we keep that in our minds while we simultaneously try to ensure that those who have money and have some flexibility in money are using some percentage of it to address problems in the larger Black community outside of their particular sphere. And the only other thing I'll say is that we are at a point now, the last campaign that I did, we were asking for serious money. And people with money were not accustomed to Black people asking for serious money. And I say serious being 6 figures and above, and $1 million and more. And I had instances where you go and you tell people what you wanted and how much money it was going to cost, and how much you wanted them to kick in. They look at you like you were crazy. And then you have to sit there and have a conversation to bring them into the new reality that we're living in. An organization used to run on $500,000 and now runs on $5-6 million annually. So I have to raise $5 or $6 million every year.
Right.
And it's now more than that, but we don't, our minds don't adjust to that very quickly, especially when we're on the philanthropy side.
Yeah. Dr. Dotson, we'll come back to you. I do want to go over to Dr. West now. Dr. West joining me again. So you have written, white America has been historically weak-willed in ensuring racial justice and has continued to resist full accepting the humanity of Blacks. So our discussion tonight centers around the internal damage that has evolved as a result of that predatory history there. How are we our own worst enemy, and how do we move beyond that?
You see, I think the best of the rich legacy of Margaret Hawkins and Sarah Scott, and Patricia Russell McLeod, and Irene B. West, and others is to extricate the white supremacy inside of Black people. So we are in touch with the best of our history, not by hating vanilla brothers and sisters, but by loving ourselves and therefore not being obsessed with the white gaze and being more concerned with the Black gaze of each other, so that our perception of each other is not mediated with a white supremacist lens. You see, and that's precisely what has happened over 400 years. If you can convince Black people that we're less beautiful and less moral and less intelligent, we got to go through life scared and intimidated and wearing the mask, the way the great Paul Laurence Dunbar put it, then we end up just well-adjusted to injustice. So that our conception of success is just fitting into an unjust status quo, rather than bearing witness and telling the truth about the suffering that status quo creates. What Brother Howard was talking about in terms of how society, how the system, how the status quo reinforces the wealth inequality, reinforces the white and male supremacy, and so forth. And so when you have a movement and an organization that says we are about grace, dignity, and friendship, it's like Gladys Knight and the Pips. Get on the friendship train. Or the OJs, get on the love train. And justice is what love looks like in public, right? So friendship is a form of love. What happens when Black women of grace and dignity and self-confidence and self-respect get together? Lord have mercy. Unlimited potential. See what I mean? That's really what we're talking about. And I don't think any book could capture that. You know, I knew Brother Lawrence from Princeton and so forth. And we had our critical dialogues and so on and so forth. I believe in Lift Every Voice, our anthem. So people have a right to be wrong, have a right to put forward their arguments, lay out their critiques and so forth. E. Franklin Frazier had his critique of the Black bourgeoisie in 1957. Nathan Hare had his critique of the Black Anglo-Saxons in 1965. People have a right to raise their voices. And then the links have a right to say, you haven't told some of the fundamental truths about how we loving the people, serving the people, and our friendship is tied to our service. We got the same critique of the Alpha brothers. How you gonna get a Paul Robeson? How you gonna get a Du Bois? Alpha. Ooh, doesn't look like they well-adjusted to injustice. Doesn't look like they intoxicated with the wine of the world. Doesn't look like they obsessed with the felicities of bourgeois existence. No, those Black middle-class folk, Martin King, they are loving the people, serving the people. Put that in your book, as well as some of the critiques of the less salutary tendencies of the Black bourgeoisie and the Black elite and so on. Tell the full story. You see them? And that's really, that's important to bear witness. But we do have to learn and listen. There's no doubt about that. Our critics are always sources of growth for us. And in the end, you never love Black people, people who've been taught to hate themselves. You never love Black people in order for them to love you back. You love Black people because they're worthy of being loved.
And Dr. West, I'm going to pause you there because you're actually the perfect lead-in for our next transition slide here. We're talking about the summer of 2020, right? Last year was a bear for so many of us. We had George Floyd, we had the widespread protests, we had, oh my goodness, Black Lives Matter, police killings, boycotts, just it goes on and on, right? All of that hit the mainstream as America united in the fight against injustice. No matter what kind of people you may associate yourself with, a blind eye cannot be turned at all and will not be turned to the plight of America's people of color. It's potentially, probably, I can say this, probably one of the most daunting plights in terms of here in America. We have all recognized we have a responsibility, if not for the past, for the sake of the future. As there is strength in numbers, and we do know that, we are seeing that it is evident today in terms of what we are hearing here during this panel discussion. So in our next segment, we will discuss the critical foundation of recognizing the voice of one accord and how we can best move forward as agents of change.
the right thing to do to stand up for our children. It is the right thing to do to speak up for our children. It is the right thing to do to fight for our children. Because if we don't fight for our children, we can't expect nobody else to fight for our children. I rest my case and I will accept your verdict. Thank you.
Okay, moving forward as change agents, we are going to be doing a bit of a speed round here, but I, of course, want to get the perspective of all our extraordinary panelists here tonight. So, Dr. West, I'm going to start with you. Let's see if we can make it quick. I know, you know what they say, when all of us get together, we can't help but just talking. But listen, you are renowned, you know, for being so unapologetic. We know, just such a voice for the call to action. But the truth in Black America is that most of us, ding, 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 are not independently wealthy, right? So in this world where the majority of people are dependent on other entities for survival, how can one have a strong voice of substance and critique without jeopardizing their livelihood?
Wonderful question. One is, we got to talk about our spiritual power, our moral power. We always have the power to be persons of integrity and honesty and decency. We always have the power to shatter indifference and callousness and be forces for good in terms of how we connect with one another. We can organize, we can mobilize in institutions in place, the churches, the mosque and others, trade unions, and in the sororities and the fraternities. Now, it's true, when it comes to financial power, then that's going to be a different question. Other than that 1% and then the upper middle class, most of our precious brothers and sisters are broke as the Ten Commandments financially. Massive poverty and underemployment and so forth, or at least much too much. But if we lose sight of our moral and spiritual power, then we'll be too obsessed with quantity, and we ought to be focusing on both quality of persons as well as quantity. And I want to thank you for doing a wonderful job tonight. I'm telling you.
Dr. West, it means a lot. Thank you so much. I want to transition now to Dr. Russell McLeod again. Okay, so we're keeping it tight, but we are moving along though. We know that Links Incorporated, as a matter of fact, during your administration, when you served as president, you led an ambitious task of building schools in Africa. That's a far cry from the Lynx and Minx stereotype, if you will. When the focus is on the status quo of the consistent needs of voter registration, health disparities, and the list goes on and on. How do you raise the bar and excite the body to the next level of transformative change as protectors of our people?
I was in a taxi in DC with a lead psychiatrist, African-American woman. We were going to our venue, and all of a sudden she said, "Pat, what is our flashpoint?" I said, "What?" She said, "What is our flash point? What is it that gets your attention to move from transactional to transformational? What is it that excites, ignites, magnetizes your interest, intrigue, effort to be transformational?" We need to be substantive, relevant, and engage actively in sustained change. Now, living while Black is a reality check in America. In the last 2 decades, you have innumerable examples of invasion, death and dying, assassination, of folk that are tried and found what? Oh, no charge, innocent. It's just fine. Oh, we can't find any cause to arrest you for just living white with a privilege. Okay, so What is the flashpoint that makes organizations, associations, and groups collectivize their efforts now to say that we are going to stop talking about it and be about it? What is it that keeps us from pontificating, giving rhetoric rather than reason, and coming up with the plan? Amanda Gorman, the Youth Poet Laureate at the 2021 Biden-Harris inauguration, said this: "There's always a light if you dare to see it.
Mm.
There's always a light if you dare to be it." So therefore, how many more examples do we need? How many more reasons do we need to collectivize our efforts to empower, to improve, to be the change agents that you speak of? We cannot continue to miss the memo. Stay woke. What's the flashpoint? The Jewish people in the Holocaust said, what? Never again.
Mm.
And they tell you, even in domestic encounter, enough already. The Black people will be the first to talk to the hand. We're not going down that street. So what is our flashpoint to say never, 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 never again? Stay woke.
Stay woke. All right, Dr. Dotson, we are going to round things out with you. And I think that this is a perfect question to round out our evening here. From a bird's eye view and cursory, if you will, it's in its historical and contemporary context. Are Black organizations doing enough for the community? And then to follow that up, what more do you feel could be done, or are they on point?
There's a level at which I'd like to kind of rephrase doing enough with the community rather than for the community. And I'd like to think that there are more than enough opportunities for the two parts of the community to work together on contemporary challenges, some of which are actually facing people on the upper economic side. But I think that we're not doing as much as we could because we're probably not thinking about it as we should. We're thinking about it as charity rather than as partnerships. We're thinking about it as in some respects, and I'll say this for some of the organizations, not all, but for probably far too many, 5 scholarships has become their limit of expectations of themselves each year. And 5 scholarships help, but there's a bigger statement of need that's out there that both the poor and the middle class have. And there's a need for probably each of our organizations to ask ourselves, what more can we do? What more can be done to speed us along this agenda? We've got 400 years and we're still not there. We have more people and more knowledge and more better positioning than we've had in a long time, probably since the Reconstruction period. But in the Reconstruction period, we had neither the resources nor the kind of knowledge to take us to our most advanced position. We're in position to do that now with the resources that we have, and we just need to begin thinking about maximizing those resources rather than simply meeting our philanthropic obligation. And I'll leave it at that.
I think that's a perfect place to leave it. Before we go, I want to, give me 1 second here, because I know we're running a little bit over time, but I do want to go back around, even though I know Dr. Dotson, you know, I said you were at a little encore, why not? I want to go back around and have final thoughts, if you will, 30 seconds from each one of our panelists here tonight. And I'm going to start with you, Dr. West.
I just say we ought to be blessed to acknowledge that we are a great people. We're a world historical people who disproportionately shape the culture, the spirit, discourses of the world. We just need institutional capacity to be able to execute the best of our morality, our spirituality, our courage, our vision, and our soulfulness.
Wonderful. And Dr. Russell McLeod.
Person was transitioning and arrived at the door of entry for the afterlife. And they said, where are your wounds? Where are your scars? And they said, scars? Wounds? I don't have any scars. I don't have any wounds. And then the question was asked, is there nothing worth fighting for? Was there nothing worth fighting for? The Lynx Inc. sees in future that the collective effort of our people can dare to have wounds, but it's worth fighting for.
And you, Dr. Dotson.
I have a very simple message to those who are out there. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes.
Mm.
We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right.
And on that note,
Get busy.
what were you going to say?
With our wounds and our scars, but we're swinging like Ella Fitzgerald and Duke Ellington.
Yeah.
Don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much. First of all, it is an honor for me to even be in the presence of a virtual room with the three of you. Truly, it really is. And to be able to carry on this conversation, I have to say I was a little nervous coming in because I knew I was surrounded by so many people that are just so powerful, have such powerful voices, and have done so much throughout their lives. So the fact that I was able to sit here with you tonight and be part of this conversation truly is an honor. So thank you so very much.
You did a fine job. Thank you.
You did a wonderful,
Thank you.
wonderful job.
Wonderful
Thank
job.
you.
Thank you.
And so we are going to close out tonight. I know we went a little bit over time, but I hope that everyone was still entertained and they're walking away with something to think about and to continue passing on, hopefully, to the next generation as we continue our play. Sisters and brothers, we thank you for joining us tonight for this dialogue designed to educate and empower and ultimately engage us as a people to uplift the underserved, which we know is just so important. On behalf of the Southern area of the Lynx Incorporated, I am extending an extra special embrace of gratitude to our panelists once again tonight as we start the conversation of moving beyond our kind of people. We close with a message tonight from the Southern Area Program Chair, Dr. Deborah Thomas.
Thank you, Alex, for moderating a stimulating discussion on racism, colorism, and classism. To our distinguished panelists, the wisdom, vision, facts, and insights that you have shared have certainly generated opportunities for introspection. The Southern Area Program Team is indeed appreciative of the contributions that you all have given to this evening's presentation. Our third part within our Emerald Infusion Behind the Lens will be aired on December 9th. And as I reference our three-part series, I do want to say that it is built upon the concept that using film from television, documentaries, or cinema provide an opportunity for us to explore societal issues and to create opportunities for critical conversations. This innovative programming in the arts facet is called Transforming Communities Through Film. As I said earlier, the third part in the series is scheduled to air December 9th. We will continue to go beyond the lens and identify opportunities for community discussions and strategic plans. Join us for another Linksversation on December 9th. But until then, stay safe and keep the vision focused. Have a pleasant evening.